What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to share my very enthusiastic review of the new movie Jackass Forever, starring most of the old gang, including Johnny Knoxville, Steve O, Chris Pontius, Wee Man Acuna, Preston Lacey, Dave England, and Aaron McGahee. Some of these fellows are looking old as hell these days, but they're still willing to put their bodies and their sanity on the line, all so that we, the audience, can have a good laugh. But what was really cool this time around was seeing the beginning of the passing of the baton to a new generation of nutcases. Jackass Forever presented a whole bunch of new faces like Rachel Wolfson, Zach Holmes, Eric Manaka, Jasper, Poopies, and special guest appearances by some old and some new faces, including Spike Jones, Tony Hawk, Eric Andre, Machine Gun Kelly, and the heavyweight champion of the UFC, Francis Ngannou. These guys have been making me laugh my balls off for 20 years, and I've watched the previous 3 movies many times over, and I can't believe that it's been over 10 years since the last movie. Some film snobs out there like to look down on these movies, but that's their loss as far as I'm concerned. I like watching dangerous stunts, and I like comedy, and all 4 Jackass movies seriously deliver on both fronts. I'll never look sideways at anything that makes me laugh this hard, but if you do want to get snobby, let me pause to admit that I fetishize the hell out of old movies. They're my first and only religion, and to put the Jackass phenomenon in the proper context, I think these guys are just the latest iteration of a tradition that goes back 100 years to the silent era when film pioneers like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton first demonstrated the value of a good kick in the pants, or in the case of Jackass, a good kick in the nuts, and there are many throughout this movie. I don't think I've ever seen so many cock and balls projected up on the big screen before, all while being subjected to every form of creative abuse and torture that these deranged lunatics can think of. And for me, this was the first movie of 2022 where it was absolutely 100% worth it to throw down some cash and walk over to my neighborhood theater and watch it with a proper live audience. And the movie just flew by. I never once checked the time. I never once had to go to the bathroom. The movie had my complete and total full attention, and by the end of the flick, I was basically physically exhausted from laughing and screaming in horror. Easily the most vocal response I've had to any movie for the last 2 years. All I can say is that I really needed that release, and I urge everyone to head straight to the theater so they can all enjoy that same sensation. Now, it's basically impossible to discuss these movies without talking about some of the stunts that are involved, but I'll do my best not to wallow on the specific details. But if you want to go in totally, completely fresh, then you might want to bail out of this video now. But let's get into some of the key details. As is always the case, we have Jeff Tremaine back in the director's chair, who in addition to directing the previous 3 Jackass movies, has also given us shows like Wild Boys, which I also really enjoyed. And I think as long as Tremaine and Knoxville remain on board this franchise, it can continue indefinitely as long as they keep bringing in some new blood. And I was a little sad not to see Bam Margera in the cast. I've been watching him and stuff since the days of like CKY2K, and my understanding is that they wanted him to go into rehab before joining the shoot, and it all got a little nasty from there, but I miss seeing him freak out around snakes or leaving alligators in his parents' house. Hopefully he'll be back for future installments. And speaking of those missing in action, at the very end the movie offered a nice little tribute to Ryan Dunn, who got killed in a car wreck back in 2011. But what's amazing to me is how much fun these guys seem to be having after all these years. I mean, they all have gray hair and like bags under their eyes, and like they're covered in scars and their skin sagging. I mean, they're old at this point, but Johnny Knoxville, he's still happy to do the most dangerous stunts of them all, specifically one with a bull in this movie that is just as awe-inspiring as it was suicidally reckless. But Steve O came in at number 2 with a stunt involving bees and his junk that just had me writhing in my chair in agony. There's just so much abuse to their dicks in this flick. Some of it's hysterical, like the opening title sequence where Chris Pontius's dick goes on a Godzilla-style rampage through this small town. But poor Aaron McGahee, he does 4 stunts in a row involving his special package, which leave his little John Thomas basically cut to pieces. And there are a few scenes where it feels like the old-timers like Aaron and Dave England are just in a state of shock, because no gag is ever just the gag. There's always a double cross and a triple cross where it just gets worse and worse. And there's one bit where you can see Wee Man begging the director Jeff Tremaine in total sincerity just to stop one particular scene, but you can't argue with what ends up on the screen, in particular the Silence of the Lambs sketch where a few of them are tormented in the dark by folks wearing night goggles. I don't know what kind of a release these guys have to sign before doing one of these movies, but these guys are the definition of just being a good sport and just rolling with it, all while your friends are doing the most unforgivable shit imaginable all around you. But Luckily, there's a bunch of fresh meat this time, ready to be ground up into hamburger meat. Zach Holmes is basically Preston Lacey 2.0, and by the end of the movie, every inch of him is covered in bruises and lacerations, but he's smiling and laughing and puking every step of the way. There's a lot of puking in this flick, especially from the crew, when they see some shit that just absolutely crosses the line, like Chris Pontius suddenly voluntarily swigging about a half gallon of pig cum when it's not even part of the stunt. And newcomer Jasper seems to be game as hell for just about anything. He is laughing and howling and having a blast, as well as another newcomer by the name of Poopies, who seems like half-wasted and sunburned and kind of doesn't know where he is half the time. And he's always screaming and horror at the crap that's happening to him, but he seems to be having a good time, so more power to him. But the older cast members make it very clear that the young guns are going to be paying their dues with this movie and whatever comes next. And the last major newcomer, Rachel Wolfson, she more than holds her own as the first girl to join the cast, although it must be said she doesn't expose herself to any of the casual genital mutilation that characterizes most of this movie. But getting back to the old timers, I love seeing Tony Hawk pop in wearing his classic pink t-shirt from his days with the Bones Brigade. Tony Hawk was my hero back in the 80s. I was a little skate rat. I did my best to copy his signature haircut. And I also really enjoyed seeing Spike Jonze still involved with the crew, operating a camera for some of the stunts, although he doesn't get in front of the camera for anything. But last of all, I have to say, I was really impressed by the ambition and scale of this movie, both the opening title sequence as well as the closing scene or stunt. They're pretty goddamn epic and operatic and cinematic in comparison to the rest of the movie. They're definitely trying to leave the biggest impression possible on you before you leave the theater, and it was just a wild ride. And by comparison, most TV shows and movies these days feel so pretentious or self-important or self-congratulatory, or worst of all, nauseatingly nostalgic. Jackass Forever is just entertaining as hell. It wants all of us to have a laugh, and it was 100% successful in that endeavor. And I look forward to watching it again. And next time around, I'll most definitely be in an intense state of altered consciousness to really get the maximum impact from the experience. But in closing, I was a little worried I wouldn't know how to review a comedy like this, but I think I got my point across. Thanks for listening to my rant. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified for future content. But I hope everyone enjoys the movie. Hope everyone has a great weekend. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.